So hello and welcome to episode 21 of the Women in Manufacturing Association's Hear Her Story podcast. My name is Allison Graylis, and I am the president and founder of the Women in Manufacturing Association and Education Foundation. As your host, it is my great pleasure to introduce you to our guest for this episode, Kathleen Edge. Kathleen is the EVP of Operations at Southwire. Since joining Southwire in 2013, she was named one of Atlanta Business Chronicle's Women Who Mean Business 2019 honorees and has been a keynote at numerous conferences, including most recently our Women in Manufacturing Association 2022 Summit held in Atlanta. Welcome, Kathleen.
Thank you, Allison. Glad to be here.
We are thrilled to have you on the podcast today and for you to share your story and information and inspiration around your journey in leadership and manufacturing. And as we often do with guests, we'd love to first start with you telling us a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, what your childhood was like, early interest, all of those fun pieces that then created and molded the current woman that you are today.
That's a long way to go, given that I'm 58 years old, but a little bit tells a lot about me. Is I grew up in Southern California, specifically in San Diego. But I was born into a very large family. I'm the youngest of six. Now, if anybody who knows me, that explains a lot of my personality. But we were very much a tribe. So there was only 8 years difference between my eldest sister, Laura, and myself. So my mother at 29 years of age had 6 children to raise. So that just tells you how much I'm used to being a tribe and part of a team, which might explain a lot of why I'm in manufacturing. But unusual for me is we moved around a lot in the Southern California region because my father would start up different churches. He was more the president of the church that ran the operations than the minister, the pastor. And so I went to a lot of very small schools all the way up until the 7th grade. So my sister and I were both in the same school, and there was 3 people in her class in the 8th grade and 2 people in mine. It was a 1-room classroom. And when you got done with your work, you went and taught the kindergartners. So it's very much in a very small bubble for a lot of my life. And then I went into high school, a public high school. My mom said, I need you to be more social. And then I was a part of a class of 800 people. And so I really thrived there. But as a young child, everybody always wanted to play Barbies and dolls, and that was never me. And my father was a lineman, and he used to bring home from the women in the office and have all these empty forms. I used to play office. So at 9 years old, I sat at my dad's desk and I had this old rotary phone that wasn't connected to anything. And I had this, for those who are my age, you had the orange juice concentrate can, I had all my pens and pencils in it. And I was filling out these forms, and literally I was running a business. And I don't know why I was calling China, but I was calling China. I called New York. And so Kathleen, my biggest fun thing to do was to play office and run a business. I don't know why. I didn't have anybody in my family that did that, but it was just what I like to do. So I was a little bit different always. And so I've never quite fit any mold. As much as my sisters used to try to kick me under the table to fit in, I never quite did. So part of this, I just was bold and emboldened by my brothers and sisters to be who I wanted to be. And I think that's helped me a lot in manufacturing to blaze my own trail in a way, because I always did it as a child.
So that's really interesting. You go from really small school in class of 1, 2, 3 people to then 800 must have been a huge shock. And you said, though, you thrived there and it was really good for you. How did you learn to adapt from going from such a small environment to a big environment? And then as well, how did you adapt kind of taking these unique interests and how did you apply them into kind of what you then pursued in education and career?
What I didn't know when I was sitting there trying to run a little business for whatever reason, I don't even know what I was selling, but I was going to sell something. And that when you were in that small school and you're in the older kids, you're there mentoring and teaching the kindergartners and the 1st graders. So when you were done with your studies, you went and helped the teacher teach other kids. So when I got into the large high school, I've met some really, really good friends. And I just went this summer to my 40th high school reunion. So still one of my best friends, we still talk every week now. But I met her because both our last names were G. My maiden name's a G. So it's Karen Gray and Kathleen Geezy. And we met in line, signed up for classes. And because it was a school that was just starting in a brand new suburb of San Diego, they were starting the drill team from scratch. And so for whatever reason, I never had done dance or drill team. She goes, why don't you come try out with me? And started on the drill team, and I became part of the drill team. Again, I'm always attracted to being part of a team and ultimately thrived there. And when I graduated as a senior, I was a captain of the drill team, and I had been with that drill team for 5 years from 8th grade to graduation. So for me, it was really finding that right group that I could then be a part of a team and an organization, and had a blast, traveled different places, went to parades and football halftimes and basketball games, and just had a great time with a tribe of other females.
So important, that tribe of other females. And interestingly, I have my reunion coming up, my 30th. We're celebrating with a close group of 7 of us in Charleston here in December as an early 30th anniversary and reunion. And that was my tribe. And I think it's that tribe that's so important, to find people like you who have, and they don't necessarily need to be identical, but they have similar values, similar interests, but you don't all have to be cookie cutter, same person, but that, they're your group that you find support from and inspiration, and they introduce you to new things. And it's so fun when we get together, and probably likewise for you with your group, just to see where everyone's ended up. And we all are doing such different things. And looking back to high school, did I think I'd be running a manufacturing trade association? Probably not.
No.
I thought I would be an attorney or working in politics or doing something that was way different than what I'm doing now. But gosh, so happy that I landed where I am now and that I made my way here. And I'm sure for you too, when you were on drill team and in high school, what did you think you wanted to do? And then how did you end up where you are present day and doing what you're doing?
I'm unusual in the fact I didn't have that trajectory to know. So I didn't know what I was going to do. I knew I always wanted to go to college. I was the first one in my family to graduate from college. I just knew I was going to go to college, but I didn't have, like a lot of other leaders I've met, they say, I know I wanted to be this, I landed here. I was just trying to figure it out as I went along. Every step of my journey is, I'm very much a believer in getting different experiences and have them build upon one another that may lead you to places you never thought of. I never would have thought I would have been running manufacturing distribution for a company. It was never even 10 years ago in my trajectory. So part of it is I'm very open to different experiences and always open to challenges. One of my biggest traits, I believe, is that my tenacity and my resiliency. I think that has paid dividends for me in my career. But I also have to give homage to the partner I chose in my life, Hugh Anthony Edge. So I was going to San Diego State and I met him, and he was stationed at Miramar. So think about Miramar, the original Top Gun movie. That's when I met my husband during Top Gun being filmed at Miramar, where he was stationed. And for all those women who love the volleyball scene, well, that was my husband's volleyball court, because he was a photographer in the Navy, and that was photography building. So we had to go see the Maverick movie just because there's a whole lot of nostalgia for us. And we met, fell madly in love. I quit college, got married. He got out of the Navy, moved to Alabama, where he called home, and I transferred to the University of Alabama, and I've been an adopted Southerner for the last 37 years. So again, that was never in my trajectory. Oddly enough, the very first album I could buy with my own allowance was a Steely Dan album called Asia. And there's a song in there, Deacon Blues, and it talked about the Crimson Tide. I didn't know what that was. Then I go to the University of Alabama, I'm like, oh, that's what the Crimson Tide is. So there's always these little whispers and signs that's pointing you in a direction. And I just don't know if I was self-aware enough to know where I was going to land. But I met a partner in life that actually helped me to become more than I would have on my own. And I've been forever blessed for that. And he gave up his career for me back in 1995 and has allowed me to flourish through his support. So it gave us the freedom to move wherever we needed to move and do whatever we wanted to do. So I think a lot of ways, some women know, like, you knew what you wanted to do. I knew I wanted to be in a leadership role, but I didn't know in what capacity I would serve to do that.
I love that you had those small, maybe hints of what was to be your future and, your album and different places. You spoke about your supportive husband. And so often when we have conversations with, especially very senior leaders in business and in manufacturing, there's often that decision where the spouse or partner steps back so that one can rise and have other opportunities. And, it's interesting. You wonder, how would things have been different had you not had that husband that jointly partnered with you to say, you know what, I will do this. I want to support your career and your growth. And I'm sure you've seen women who didn't have that same level of support. And, how did you see those women who maybe didn't have that same type of support network struggle? And how did they combat that? Because not everybody has a husband who's going to say, hey, I'm going to sit at home, stay at home, take a step back in my career. So how do you advise women who've been challenged with that? Or have you seen that firsthand?
I've seen that firsthand. I've also experienced it myself. And it's often when I speak at an event or I'm mentoring, particularly women, because we're trying to find work-life balance. For whatever reason, we believe perfection is attainable. And the only way you get work-life balance means everything's perfectly in balance. Well, that never happens. It never happens. So for me, I've had a lot of setbacks in my life in that I've been able to re-articulate what it means to me. And I call it work-life investment ratio. And I think there are different seasons in your life where work's going to be first and family's going to be second. And there's other seasons in your life where family must come first and work may be second, third, fourth, or fifth. And you have to be realistic in your career, what responsibilities you have. Are you willing to step back or lean in and figure out what that investment ratio is for you based on your dreams for your family? When I met didn't know was going to be a husband at the time, we both talked as we dated. Neither one of us ever had the desire to raise children. I was the youngest of 6 and watched my mother. It looked really hard. It's like, I don't know if I want to do that. And so we never really made the major decision in our marriage until probably 10 years in. If we were going to have children, we may do it later in life and adopt, and we're very open to that. But when we're flipping the coin, who's going to walk the dog, we finally decided we probably should not have responsibility for a human life. We're trying to deal with a 4-legged furry child, and I've always had furry children. But for us, I was very much driven by my career and was not focusing on my marriage until I came home one day and there was an article, and my husband wasn't home. We were supposed to go out to dinner and I was late as always. And there was an article cut out of the newspaper back when you used to get newspapers, coffee table about workaholics. And he was already at the little Mexican restaurant we're going to go to waiting for me to show up because he knew I'd be late because I just went on and got here when you're supposed to be here. And I'm like, wow, I need to do something different. So I have a very strong partner in that he's able to have a voice, that I'm able to have a voice. And that's not easy. It's not every day is, sunshine and roses. It's every day it's worth the investment to share. And he worked full time and I worked full time to put me through college. And I remember after I graduated with my bachelor's in accounting, I said, I'm thinking about going and getting my master's in accounting. He goes, well, are you going to do it? I said, I'll try it for a semester or maybe I'll go start working. He goes, you either go start working or you go all in. We don't ever try something, we finish it. I'm like, well, dang. Okay. So I went and got my master's in accounting and he knew we'd move. So he had to give up his career. He was a photographer at the University of Alabama, had been a photographer in the United States Navy. He moved with me. 6 months later, I moved him again. A year later, I moved him again. And by our 4th move, he said, why don't I stop for 5 years? And then you pick a city and I'll get my career back on track. So it was never all, but 5 years later, it was in 2000. We're on probably our 6th move by then. So I moved him 8 times in 14 years for my career. And he says, are you good with this? I'm good with this because he took care of everything for me. And when we were together on the weekends, we were together. And so for us, it worked. And so it wouldn't work for everybody, but figure out what your investment ratio needs to be and know that it's going to change, but have the conversation with whoever you choose to share your life with. A lot of times it's never said out loud. And so you don't have the conversation. You're making assumptions what each other would do.
That's such important advice. And I think I love that phrase and that concept of investment ratio. I've heard work-life integration is another way to talk about that things integrate, that they're not ever probably going to be balanced, and that there's always going to be fluidity in what's taking priority, whether it be your family, your faith, your health, your professional life, your business. All those things flex in different times and in different seasons, I think, as you said. And I really like that concept of investment ratio. I think likewise, I love your statements around communication with whoever you choose to spend your time in life with, because I think so often we make decisions and we don't think about all those implications. And is that person really on board when things change in your life, in your profession? As we know, many women rise, which is great, even more women rising present day. But when those opportunities come about, it's really got to be realistic conversations with those partners to say, are you on board? Like, do you understand what this means for our life, family, moving, your career? Because there's lots of implications. And I think there's so many people touched by those decisions that we make, which can be really tough. And so I think really good advice. And you talked a little bit too about when you have mentoring conversations, when I talk to people present day, and I just had a conversation this week with someone around that concept of reality and Instagram and social media presenting, these false narratives of what our lives should look like. And why I bring it up is you mentioned, again, the integration piece. So I know I, as a working mom for years, tried to do it all. I wanted my kids' rooms to be perfectly set and ready for them when they got home. And I made baked goods for volunteer opportunities at school. I would kill myself. I was running myself ragged to live this perfect life of, I can be a busy woman leader, but at the same time, I'm going to be that perfect mom, that perfect volunteer at school. And I think social media is really so much even more present day negatively impacting younger women who think, I need to be like this. I need to have the perfectly smelling house with the diffuser and the homemade healthy meal and all of these things in the perfect house, but also have this great career and I can do it all. And it's so unrealistic and so unattainable. So when I talk to some of the women I mentor, I say that you have to realize that's not realistic. That's a false narrative you're seeing on social media. You're going to kill yourself trying to achieve that.
Well, it's funny you should say that because it made me have a vision. Corky Whipple was a leader that ran in operations. When I was in human resources, I asked him to come into human resources. And he's like, why would I do that? I said, I need more diversity from people from a business background. And frankly, in human resources, there's a lot of women. I need some more men in human resources. So he came in, but I remember the second year he was on my team, I got a Christmas card from him and it was his wife and all his daughters. And it's this beautiful picture. And you turn it over and it says, this is the real Christmas card. And it was all the pictures of all the chaos that went on to get that one good picture. And I was like, now that to me was the best card I've ever gotten because it was the truth.
I love it.
We got this one good shot, but this is the real picture on the backside. And I thought that's what made me think of it. You were trying so hard to live up to this expectation that nobody else is living up to.
Yeah, I think, and that's one of the positives, I think, of pandemic. When you think about that, I feel like we've kind of uncovered the realness of people and of employees. And for so often it wasn't I've been working 22 years in this trade association space, and obviously prior to that, other jobs, but you'd go to work and it was just Allison employee or Kathleen employee. And so often we didn't recognize the whole human person. Are they dealing with caregiver issues? Are they dealing with wellness? Are they dealing with all these other impacts that make you, Kathleen, a diverse and rounded person, and me likewise? And so I think, hopefully for the betterment of future and current employees, we recognize that whole person that's coming to work. And pandemic obviously has been a positive as well. One of the positives is to the flexibility piece. So giving people that flexibility option in many positions, not all, obviously, where they can maybe better balance or integrate some of those other demands they have.
Absolutely. And I applaud every working mother because I know I made a choice. It was my oldest sister who has 4. It was a very difficult decision for a lot of people at the time. My husband, I chose not to because it was pretty much, you were supposed to have children. And she says, I applaud that you two both knew it wasn't right for you. I said, I knew what it would take for me and I wasn't willing to do it because I know I'm all in all the time. So I applaud working mothers. And I think at times people are like, oh, Kathleen won't know what it's like to be a working mother. No, I don't know it, but I can empathize. And I'm probably one of the best advocates. Go be mom and dad first. Work never trumps that role ever.
That's so important that you support that. And, I think more and more leaders are supporting that. They're seeing that value of, for you to retain people, you need to care about those people and their external lives as well, which is really important. So can you tell us a little bit then about how you went from high school and then college, and how did you find your way first into a manufacturing career?
I didn't know manufacturing. My family did manufacturing. I had a great professor at the University of Alabama, Dr. Key. And everybody was going to accounting to go be a CPA. And I'm like, internal audit and all the other things. I'm like, that doesn't even excite me. And I was talking with him. And he goes, well, you're really good at this cost accounting, because I took his cost accounting classes. Because you ever thought of going to manufacturing? I'm like, what would I do in manufacturing? He talked to me about how you cost out the products and how you have to figure out how to get the margins. And I'm like, that's pretty exciting. So it was through him that I started doing research, and I did the interviews with all, at that time, the big 8, and none of those interviews. And I then flew up to Dow and flew out to Kimberly-Clark. And I'm like, now that kind of a role. And even at Kimberly-Clark at the time, you did an interview, you had to do a simulation. So it was the inbox because there was no email at the time. So you had the inbox where they would give you an envelope of everything that's in your inbox. And the first thing you have is memo that says your boss can't be here to greet you on day 1, but these are things you need to do. And it was going through problem solving and reading and what's important. And what I find is, and what I've told everybody in every role I've had in manufacturing for the last 32 years, if you love problem solving, it's the industry for you. Whether you're in sales and marketing, whether you're in accounting and finance, whether you're in engineering or you're in distribution, manufacturing is all about solving problems because you're trying to take all this disparate ecosystem and have it work efficiently from end to end, from the customer's order all the way to the customer's delivery. It is a complex ecosystem that requires a lot of teamwork and problem solving to be the best and most efficient at it. So I give all mine to Dr. Key because I never would have thought about it. And my very first job was a financial associate in Beach Island, South Carolina, for this big manufacturing facility that made a lot of consumer products for Kimberly-Clark. And I became the financial associate. I had to cost out the rolled products. That was my very first job. That's a fancy word for toilet paper and paper towels. So I costed out, and my first goal, I remember they gave me, and they said, you have to find $1 million cost out opportunity. I'm like, I go home and I told my husband, I don't think I'm going to make it because I got to find $1 million, which seemed like impossible. But you figure out and you're pushed to do it and to figure it out and understand it. And I just thrived in that environment. Again, it's another team environment. So I'm attracted to that. I'm attracted to that type of culture. And so for me, it was, I had the right professor that said, hey, you seem to be attracted to this aspect of the accounting. Have you considered this career? Otherwise, I don't know. I probably would have ended up as an internal auditor. I probably wouldn't have lived to my fullest potential. I wouldn't think so.
That's so great that that professor identified this linkage of where you had strengths in a certain subject matter and area, and then made that recommendation to manufacturing. As you said, you probably would have never thought of, hey, that's where I want to be, or that's where I'm going to go. And that's great that that person did that. So as you've grown in your career from starting off, in cost accounting and doing some of the things in your early roles, how did you rise? And then as well, what were some of the challenges that you experienced as you have built your career in manufacturing?
I was probably one of the many women that thought they'll recognize my performance. So I was never worried about rising. It was about, I want to do something different. I want more responsibility. I've never been a title driven person, which makes me a little unusual. Even somebody said to me, probably I would have been 15 years into my career, they said, you're a pretty reluctant leader. I go, well, I don't see myself different than the operator on the floor because I feel like every job's important. If my job doesn't add value, I don't need to be here. So I always think I have to work twice as hard for the organization I'm leading so that I add value. And so for my challenges for me was always questioning myself early on in my career. Am I doing enough? Do I have enough to meet the expectations? So very much now called the imposter syndrome. But I don't think just women have that. I think it depends on your background. And I didn't have anybody else who had gone the career path I had that I could model in my family. But I had 100% support and cheerleaders and my sisters and everything else. So for me, it was more of questioning myself too much early on. And probably this is a trait women have, and I'm very direct when I see someone do it, is we think we have to have 100% of the skills to go for that next job. And I refer to it as we think we have to be fully baked, that we have to have every single ingredient in the recipe in order to make that cake. And I liken it that I've now learned if I'm quick enough and agile enough to learn, if I stayed in the manufacturing industry, made a lot of different widgets because it translates whatever you make. I'm not going to go into a different industry because I'm very proficient to move from function to function within this industry. So I think you have to find what your expertise is and move. My biggest challenge was questioning. But once I left finance after 7 years, which I struggled in finance, if I had to do another forecast, another inventory, and if that balance had to be a penny off, just use your penny, let's move on. And once I moved out of that into operations, I just found a whole different world. So my challenge was I should have moved quicker. I had opportunities, but I turned it down. But the advice I'd give to somebody is get a breadth of experiences, then decide where you want to have the depth. A lot of people stay for like 20 years in the depth. And I think it makes, you still have a lot of opportunities, but your opportunity is so much broader is if you've got 5 years, 5 years, 5 years, and then decide where you want to spend the next 20 years. And so when I went into HR, I had a competitive advantage to other people I was competing for certain jobs because I had the financial background, because I had the operations management background. Then I had the HR management background, but it was different in what I had to offer others.
Come work with us. Southwire is the largest wire and cable manufacturer in North America, and we are looking for talented individuals like you. Are you interested in a job where you can receive industry-leading training and development? How about working for a company where your safety is top priority? Then come join Southwire and become one of the people behind the power. Apply now at careers.southwire.com.
With nearly a century of safety experience, EMC Insurance Companies knows how to help manufacturers like you prevent accidents and costly losses. That's because we invest heavily in loss control services and resources, which helps you turn loss control into cost control. At EMC, we go beyond the basic loss control survey. Our experienced field teams, engineers, safety consultants, and industrial hygiene professionals work with you to create custom workplace safety plans for your manufacturing business. We know that creating and maintaining a safe workplace is an around-the-clock effort. To help keep safety top of mind and at your fingertips, we provide a wide variety of online tools and on-demand trainings available whenever you need them. So what are you waiting for? Contact your local independent insurance agent today or visit emcins.com and click Loss Control to find out how EMC Insurance Companies can help you better protect your manufacturing business.
So when you were building this portfolio of experience and this deep bench of knowledge in different areas, did you have a career coach? Like, who advised you or who helped give you some of this advice? Did you have a mentor who helped guide you and help you feel ready for some of these positions as they were posted? Or how did you gain that confidence and that guidance as you were trying to navigate that?
I'm a pretty astute person to watch others. So I was pretty shy that I never felt like I don't want to go bother them asking to be my mentor. If I did it over again, I would have had twice as many mentors as I did. But I had great people that I worked for that I would ask questions. The biggest question I've ever asked anybody that I worked for is, what experience was most important to get you ready for that job? And so whether it was a plant manager, whether it was I got to do a greenfield site, worked for a lovely woman, Patty Zubella. I said, how did you get to be this opportunity to lead this? So I've always been very curious and questioning, annoyingly so. So people I work for, I would just always ask about their experiences. What did they learn from? And I think we don't do that enough. A lot of people think it has to be a very formal mentorship, which I've had some of those, but I found the informal ones I learned more from. And even I had a Lynn Zupone who used to run the talent manager for the Intercontinental Hotel Group. I would go to any event she was speaking in Atlanta because I was new to HR talent management, learn from her. And she didn't know I invited her to come speak to my HR group when I became the head of HR. And I said, you never knew that you were mentoring me, but you were mentoring me from afar. And she goes, wow. I said, because you don't have to have a formal mentorship, but you have to be intentional of who do you like what they're doing and go figure out how did they figure it out.
That's great advice. And I think just asking that question, because so often, as I think you said, it's not always a simple pathway or a certain set of ingredients that got someone to where they're at. And it could be something that you never thought of, like, wow, this skill I'm missing, or this is a gap. And if I want to rise to that position, I really should be thinking about honing skills in that area. Or as well, so much is about relationships and making the right connections as well. When you look at opportunities and advancing in companies, and I would echo what you said. There's so many people that I follow or read or listen to now present day on podcasts that they inspire me, and they're providing guidance and they don't know it. And it's not a formal mentorship, but I value that person's opinion and how they have led and how they have managed and created products and services and all of these great things that constantly inspire me too.
I don't know if you do this, but I've learned when someone's asked me to be their mentor, one of the things I ask is, I need you to mentor me as well.
Yeah.
So as I'm in this season of my career, if I don't learn from others that are coming up, I may not be inclusive enough and I wouldn't even know it.
Yeah, very true.
Because I felt that as I was coming up. I remember I'm always been a very optimistically happy person, especially in the morning. And I shared that with the organization before. And I was excited to get to go to a plant manager's meeting. and I was an ops manager going, "Ooh, this is exciting. I get to be at the meeting." And I'm walking down the hall, and this guy who's been a plant manager for a long time, he goes, "Life just hasn't beaten you down enough yet." And I'm like, "What does that mean?" And I took it away going, how sad is that he's doing a job he doesn't love anymore. But I was like, wow, because I'm happy to be here. But a lot of times I think a lot of people take for granted they have a seat at the table. And then once you earn that seat at the table, you're like, they've been taking this for granted for a long time. I'm excited just to be here today.
That is very true. And I think then what can you do once you have that seat, to your point, like not taking it for granted, but also how can you change things for the better? How can you be an inspiration to other people, women in particular, and other diverse individuals to fill a next seat next to you or in that same boardroom in the future is really important. I love that he criticized you for your optimism and your happiness and that positive behavior.
Apparently was annoying him. It's okay.
And sadly, there's such a large percentage of people who are in positions and roles they hate. And you just wish that someday they'll have that wake up call where they realize, you know what? I'd be a happier person. My work environment would be a happier person. My customers would be a happier person if I find a new place and a new home. So I'm sure you mentioned a little bit about mentoring and mentees. Was there a specific meaningful experience, whether it be you mentoring someone or having a formal or informal mentor, that's impacted your career and your life that you would share?
I'll share one that's more recent. And the mentorship started out in a different way, in that when we had the African-American male that was smothered and killed in front of us on TV, it was something that I was like, I'm not understanding what's going on, the reaction. And I had a VP of HR that I know really well, and I was in operations at the time. And she said, "Kathleen, just talk to young African-American professional." And I said, "I don't want to do something that would be offensive." So she coached me through it because she's married and she's an interracial marriage. She has 2 young Black sons that she worries for all the time. There was a gentleman that I was meeting with, and the stories he told me of being pulled over on the side of the road, he's a professional engineer, beautiful family, and how he was treated and taken to the ground. And from that, I became his mentor, but I was learning from him, and it gave me chill bumps because I'm like, I don't see it through your eyes, but now I can. And so I started mentoring him, and he saw himself as a packaging engineer. And I'm like, "You're more than a packaging engineer. Why don't you see yourself as an engineering manager leading an organization?" He goes, "Well, I'm a packaging engineer." I said, "Well, if that's what you want to be," he goes, "Well, I want to be more than that." And subsequently through the mentoring, it got him to think about world in a bigger way. And he's now an engineering manager with a team of 5. It's special to me that I reached out to him to learn from him, and it created this relationship that I was able to mentor him. And so I think that's where, in a lot of ways, not always a formal that somebody can assign it. And I'm very careful that I never have more than 3 or 4 mentees. And he was one of them. But I also try to make sure I have people of different levels, different diversity. And it was a challenge somebody gave us about two years ago, is that we do a lot of mentoring, but are we mentoring our hourly employees too? And so I started making sure I have at least 1 or 2 of my mentees be somebody who sought me out from working, that either wants to grow to be a supervisor, wants to grow to be an extruder operator, wants to figure out how to step into a professional role. So part of it is I'm learning so much from the people that ask me to be mentors. And I'll share a little story because I was just last night, we had our first responder graduation dinner, and we had 2 graduations. The one I went to last night, we had 19 people finish their first responder. If anybody's ever done that, it's 72 hours of training that you do in addition to your full-time job. And you have to pass a test on paper as well as an experience. And the pride they get when they get their first responders bag is nothing but amazing. But there is this great operator that already works 12-hour shifts. She's going through our leadership and training program because she wants to be a supervisor. At the same time, she got her first responder certification, and she's trying to get a bachelor's degree. And you're like, I'm not doing enough.
Yeah.
So, I was like, I want to go have her mentor me, because how is she doing that? I could just try to get through work and be a husband. I'm not trying to take care of my husband. I'm trying to work. What is this?
I mean, that is impressive. I mean, to balance all of that stuff and to juggle all that stuff and to be so driven, as it sounds like she is, to want to complete that. And, Yeah. And you're leaving inspired by her and saying, how do I do more? And
Mhm.
how do I find more time? And I loved your sharing that story about meeting with the gentleman who was the engineering, not knowing that they maybe should aspire to be an engineering manager. And I think to your point, it's not always about formal mentoring, but it's just having conversations with people to better understand different positions, different walks of life, different experiences, because none of us have those same experiences. And it helps you as a leader, especially better understand where people are coming from and things that they're grappling with and that they've experienced that we could never fathom or that we wouldn't think people would have to, unfortunately, in 2021 or 2022 experience on a daily basis, which is really sad that those things still happen. So as you look at safety, I know safety is an important thing for all companies to obviously people want to work at a place where they feel protected and safe. It's a cultural thing for most companies, and obviously a way to retain employees is to keep them safe at work. So why is safety important in your culture planning and your organization?
I think safety lets people know the values of your company. So you can say people are our most important asset. But if you're not creating an environment where you're expected to operate in a certain way, and if someone's asked you not to, you can stop the operation, that you're expected to follow processes so you go home the same way you showed up today, what does that say about the values of your company? And my first operations job, we very safe environment. I just took for granted that everybody knew to work safe. And I got the call at 2 a.m. and had an operator that had reached in and lost the tip of her finger, and she was heading to the emergency room. I said, I'm going to meet her there. So I met her there, and I'm in the back with her, holding her hand. I go, do you want me to call your husband? She goes, no, because he has a heart condition. I don't want him to be upset. Let's figure out. And so I stayed there with her, held her hand through the whole procedure. And then we got her home, and I was forever changed. I went to every shift after that and said, I assumed you knew to be safe, but I didn't let you know how important it was as a value. And so for me as a leader, you have to let people know very intentionally what your values are. And if you want to be in manufacturing, there's a lot of risk in manufacturing, and you need to de-risk that environment so anybody from any walk of life can come and live to their fullest potential, provide for their family. And so for me, it's important because we should not be doing things in manufacturing at the expense of somebody's body, at the expense of somebody's health. And then for us, you have to have a very intentional, layered, cultural approach to safety that's around behavior and leadership versus just don't get hurt. And I think for me, and I know you did a podcast with my colleague, Becky Cranford, and she lived the story of her good friend losing her father. I haven't had that experience, but I don't ever want that experience. I don't ever want to call that family. I've had to go to Grady Hospital, which is our trauma hospital in downtown Atlanta, for people that got severely hurt, and met with the family and put the family up at a hotel to make sure they could be there for their loved one until they healed. So I'm one of those that's if somebody's going to get hurt, you got to be there for the family and help them through the healing process. So for me, I think it's a value of who you are as a leader. It's a value of who you are as a company. And if safety is not your value, you shouldn't be in manufacturing.
Really important advice. And I think, as you said, safety's got to be part of that culture. And I think a genuine part of that culture. I know things have changed dramatically since when I started touring manufacturing facilities 20 plus years ago. Back in the day, it was, let's just celebrate days without a lost time incident or without an accident. And, people were hiding injuries and almost incentivized for not sometimes being safe. And if you weren't safe, not reporting it. So I think definitely cultures have improved, but you've got to keep people safe at work. And then, as you said, if unfortunately an accident happens, to lend that support as a leader to those families and to that employee as they mend and get well.
I think it's the little things. I had an operator, my office was right there on the floor. And so I'd walk by our winder every time to get into my office, and he'd have his safety glasses up on his head. And I'd walk up and said, you need to put your safety glasses on. And if they're fogging up, we've got the no fog, let's do that. And the second time I came to him, he had his safety glasses back on top of his head. I go, well, I'm not going to allow you to be an operator here anymore if I come by a third time. He goes, it's just the safety glasses. I said, I'm not going to wait till you get hurt If I can't trust you to wear your safety glasses, I can't trust you to operate the equipment. And I didn't know at the time what an impact that had. A couple months later, there was a box on my desk around the Christmas holiday time, and it was a hand-painted ornament that his wife had made with a note and said, "Thank you. Because of you, my husband's working safer at work." I'm like, whoa.
Yeah.
So I think it comes down to the real basics. Don't wait for it to be the big trauma. If you can put your safety glasses on, wear your steel toes, put your earplugs in, don't reach in, don't go under suspended load, do all the fundamentals, it sends the message this is important.
So I know that giving back and volunteering is a large part of who you are. What organizations are you currently working with and are you passionate about?
Well, I was part of the Communities and Schools of Georgia, so I want a big shout out. But as we went through the pandemic, I had to step off the board. But Carol Lewis that runs that is about putting advocates in the schools. They're helping students with basic needs so they don't drop out. And the charity pays for all those advocates to work in the school systems in the state of Georgia. So big advocate for Communities and Schools of Georgia. But Project Gift, and Gift is for Giving Inspiration for Tomorrow, is Southwire's volunteerism program. And it's one of the things that drew me to Southwire 10 years ago, in that we have people that go during work and times with team members that we do a whole diverse set of giving back. And we always say we want to give back with our talent first and then follow with our cash. We don't want cash to be the first foremost. We will provide cash donations, but it's about, are we giving of our talent? And we have what's called a black shirt, and it started back in Hurricane Katrina when there was a Waverly, Mississippi, helping with disaster relief. And the idea was to bring Christmas to those families. And we went down there, and it started out with 5 volunteers, and we now have nearly 700 volunteers, but that they were all wearing black shirts. And just as Southwire is, we kind of take charge of things. They kept trying to run everything through there, and pretty soon they were handling all the food, handling all the Christmas gift, everything. And so it's become this whole Project Gift of, you're acknowledged and recognized as Southwire if you earn your black shirt every year. And you have to put a minimum number of volunteer hours to earn it. I had the privilege of going to the Baton Rouge floodings and hand out the disaster relief. We collect all the gifts that we give, from diapers to dog food to cat food to paper towels to bottled water. We collect all that in our communities. We personally transport it down in our Project Gift tractor trailers, and then we give it out. And I've planted community gardens. I've done cleanup of trash along the road. So I'm a very proud Project Gift black shirt. And then finally, I'm trying at this season in my career to give back to the manufacturing industry. And there's an organization, the Georgia Association of Manufacturing, that I joined the board during the pandemic, and now I'm a treasurer of the board, working to say, are we creating an environment in the state of Georgia, and are our manufacturers in Georgia providing the best environment and the best jobs and the highest paying jobs in our communities? And so I'm a big advocate for the manufacturing industry, and really, really want more women to come in it, because we don't have enough women. And I think women could thrive in this industry, because we are by nature leaders and problem solvers, whether we're leading a family, a church, an organization. And I just think the manufacturing industry is well suited for women, but we don't have enough women that know that.
I agree. So now this is the typical time when we go through some rapid fire questions and get some advice from you on maybe some things people should check out, be inspired by, or listen to. So the first is, what is your favorite quote and why?
And that's the easiest one. Do the thing you think you cannot do. And that's by Eleanor Roosevelt. And I'm just a big fan. Everybody get rid of any of the politics about it. She was a fierce woman that transformed the role of being a first lady and lived her life the way she wanted to, and didn't always go the easiest path. And I think sometimes we talk ourselves out of what we can do, and sometimes do the thing you think you cannot do, and you'll be surprised.
Your favorite book?
All-time favorite classic, To Kill a Mockingbird. I'm a big fan of Scout. I related to her when I read the book, Coming of Age, and and then when the movie came out, fell in love with Gregory Peck. So I'm just a big, big fan of To Kill a Mockingbird. There's so much to learn from that. And I think you learn the most from children when you sit down and talk with them.
And where was the last place you traveled?
Most of my friends would be surprised by this. Orlando, Florida. I went to Disney World and Universal Studios with my sisters. Not my thing. But my father passed away at 88 years of age, and my mother passed away many years ago. We happened to be in California, went to Disneyland to celebrate her life. And so we said, we haven't done it for my father yet, and he passed away in Florida. So we went to Disney World, Universal Studios, and just had fun and celebrated my dad's life.
That's really nice. And that's on my list of places to go. I'm a big Harry Potter fan, so I'm dying to go to the Universal
I
Studios
have the
there.
wand. I have the
Do
wand.
you?
Yes, I do. You have to go get the wand.
I am jealous and will have to go get the wand. And then what goals have you set for yourself for the remainder of this year, personally and or professionally?
I would say the goals I've set for myself are more for 2023 as we're coming to the close of this year. And it's really about, am I leading with enough intention? I'm a big believer of leading intention. And every year I would have 2 intentions and I would share it with my team. But since the pandemic and the supply chain, we've been in crisis management mode for 3 years. And we're coming out. It's kind of like I told you, it feels like we have, all of us have lost 20 pounds. And we're coming out of the COVID fog. It's not that it's gone. It's that it's not a crisis. And we actually have the raw materials to make what we need to make. So for me, personally and professionally, I want to be able to give back more to others and have the energy and help the organization to become a learning organization. We've been a reactive organization for the last 3 years. How can we be proactive and predictive? And so we're doubling down on our training systems and our development so that we could become a higher learning organization. So that's professionally. Personally, I want to spend more time my 4-wheeler in my backyard. I'm not doing that enough. I'm not making time.
I love it. Those are great intentions and goals. And just to close up, what is the one piece of final advice you would want to share with the next generation of women in industry and manufacturing?
The one piece of advice, surround yourself with people who are going to be honest and tell you the truth and that are good strategic advisors. I found that in my husband. I have found that in my friends, and I surround myself with a team that's willing to tell me when I'm getting it wrong.
That is so important. That's great advice. So Kathleen, it was such a pleasure talking to you today and getting to learn more about you and your story. You are inspirational, and we thank you for all that you're doing to inspire future generations of women in industry. And thanks for being a guest on Hear Her Story.
Thank you, Allison. And as I said at the Women's Manufacturing Summit, I have the utmost gratitude for you in starting this organization and giving a voice to the women in manufacturing. And so thank you for all that you do, Allison.
Well, thank you, Kathleen. That is very kind. And again, thanks for being a part of this. And I'm sure we'll stay connected and have you hear your story as you continue your career in manufacturing in the future.
Thank you, Allison.
Thank you for listening to Hear Her Story, a podcast produced by the Women in Manufacturing Association. Be sure to share, review, and subscribe to Hear Her Story on Apple, Google, Spotify, or wherever you like to listen.